Snow fell without mercy across the high valley, whispering over the pines like a ghost that refused to rest. The wind carried no sound of life, only the endless hush of winter swallowing the world whole. Clara Whitmore moved through it, her shawl drawn tight, her breath a pale ribbon in the dawn air. She had gone out to gather the morning's wood, her boots sinking deep, when she saw it, a trail of red on white, smeared like spilled ink. For a heartbeat she froze. The shape in the snow was too still, too large to be a deer. She stepped closer, her pulse hammering against the cold. A man lay half buried in the drift, bare chest against frost, blood darkening the snow beneath him. His skin was coppered by sun and scar, his hair long and tangled, his face turned to the wind as if daring it to end him. The mark painted on his arm told her what he was before his breath did. Apache. Enemy. Her stomach turned to ice. She should run. Yet when his lips moved, cracked and trembling, the words came in broken English. Low, rough, human. Please, heal me. The plea undid something inside her that fear could not hold. Her husband's voice had sounded like that once. The night fever took him. Hoarse, helpless, calling her name as she prayed for mercy. She had buried him with her own hands in this same frozen earth, and no one from town came to help. No one ever came. Clara knelt beside the man. The smell of blood and iron filled her throat. He was burning with fever even as frost gathered on his lashes. For a long moment she hovered there, torn between compassion and survival. Then, cursing softly under her breath, she pulled his arm over her shoulder and began to drag him toward the cabin. The snow resisted. The man groaned once, then went silent. By the time she reached the door, her breath was ragged, her fingers numb. She pushed the door open with her hip, half carrying, half dragging his weight inside. The cabin was small, built by her late husband's hands. A single room, stone hearth, rough table, and a cross nailed crooked above the bed. She laid the stranger on the floor by the fire, the boards creaking beneath his weight. When she peeled his coat aside, the wound glistened. A gunshot, just below the ribs, blackened at the edges. The bullet was still inside. Her pulse faltered. She had no doctor, no morphine, no right to save this man, and yet her hands moved before her conscience could speak. She fetched the knife, the boiled water, the bottle of whiskey. When the metal met his skin, he gasped, eyes snapping open like a storm breaking. They were dark, fierce, and yet not cruel. "Hold still," she whispered. "I'll make it quick." He obeyed, jaw tight, breath hissing through his teeth as she dug for the bullet. Blood welled up, hot and red against her fingers. She dropped the slug into the tin bowl, trembling. Then she stitched him as best she could, each thread a prayer she didn't remember learning. When it was done, she pressed a cloth to his side and whispered a thankless amen. The hours stretched. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, the fire crackled low. She sat in her chair, watching his chest rise and fall. Every time he stirred, her hand went to the rifle leaning against the wall. He spoke in sleep, words she didn't understand, names, maybe ghosts. She wanted to hate him. It would have been easier than this strange ache of pity she felt for a man her world told her to despise. When dusk came, she fed him broth from a spoon, her movements cautious, almost maternal. He was too weak to eat but tried anyway, the effort humbling. "You help?" he rasped, eyes fluttering open. She nodded. "Rest now." He gave a faint, almost grateful sound, then slept again. She sat by the fire, clutching her shawl, unable to stop staring at him. His shoulders bore scars, some old, some fresh, and his hands, though large and calloused, rested open, unguarded. There was no malice in the stillness of him. Only exhaustion. By nightfall, her fear had become something quieter, a watchful sort of acceptance. She checked the window, half expecting torches to appear from the distance, a search party come for her sin. None came. The wind moaned through the chimney like a warning all the same. She thought of the preacher's words back in town, the way he had looked at her last Sunday when she sat alone in the last pew. The Lord tests the merciful with impossible choices. This, she decided, was one of them. When the fire began to fade, she rose to add another log. The glow flared across the cabin walls, painting both of them in amber light. For an instant, she caught her reflection in the small cracked mirror above the hearth. Pale face, hollow eyes, hair tangled beneath a worn bonnet. A ghost tending another ghost. She knelt beside him again, brushing frost from his brow. "Don't you die here," she murmured, not sure if she was talking to him or herself. "Not after I've carried you this far." His eyelids fluttered. "Your name?" "Clara." He whispered it once, as if testing it on his tongue. Then, barely audible, he said, "Elias." The name settled in the air like snow landing on still water, fragile, final. Clara felt it strike something deep inside her chest. A man she should have left to die now had a name. The wind battered the cabin walls, making the lantern flicker. She leaned back, staring into the fire until her eyes stung. Somewhere outside, a wolf howled, a low, mournful sound that seemed to echo through both their broken lives. She thought of the trail of blood she had covered with snow, how it would vanish by morning as if none of this had happened. But it had. She could still feel the weight of him against her shoulder, the warmth of his blood seeping through her coat. That warmth, she realized, was still there, faint, dangerous, human. When she finally rose to fetch another blanket, she noticed his hand twitch toward hers in sleep, fingers barely grazing her skirt before falling away. The gesture was small, almost accidental, but it made her chest tighten. She stood frozen, torn between pulling back and letting him hold on. In the end, she did neither. She just watched the snow slide against the windowpane, her heart keeping time with the wind. By midnight, the fire had dimmed to embers. She whispered a final prayer and turned away, but before she could reach her bed, a sound stopped her. The creak of the floorboards, the rasp of his breath. "Clara!" His voice was hoarse, filled with pain but clear. She turned, startled. "You should be resting." He looked at her with fever-bright eyes and said, almost in a plea, "Don't tell them I am here." Her throat tightened. Outside, the wind howled harder, shaking the door. She didn't answer, only met his gaze. And in that silence, heavy and fragile as glass, something passed between them that neither could name. A secret. A beginning. And far off in the snow, unseen, another shadow moved through the trees, following the trail she thought she had buried. The storm held the valley in silence for days, a world trapped in white breath and waiting. Inside the cabin, the fire spoke in small tongues of orange, and the rest was quiet enough to hear a heartbeat. Elias slept most of the time, his body fighting fever, his spirit caught between life and the long road beyond. Clara moved softly through the space, feeding the fire, cleaning the wound, whispering prayers she no longer believed reached heaven. She told herself it was duty, not mercy. Yet every time he stirred, she found her hand already reaching for him before she could think. When he woke, it was near dawn. The first pale light brushed through the frost on the window. He tried to rise but winced, falling back with a sharp breath. Clara was beside him before he spoke. "You'll tear your stitches," she said, her voice calm but her pulse loud in her ears. Elias looked at her, studying the face that had hovered over him for days. His lips parted as if to ask why, but the words died. Instead, he managed a single phrase, rough but clear. "Still snowing." She blinked, surprised by the sound of his voice. "Still snowing," she answered, a faint smile ghosting over her mouth. He nodded, and something almost like peace flickered across his expression, before sleep took him again. By evening, the wind had softened. Clara opened the door a little to let in the cool air. The snow stretched unbroken into the pines. The world outside was clean, quiet, merciless. When she turned back, Elias was watching her. His eyes, dark and solemn, followed the shape of her face as if searching for the truth beneath her stillness. "You are not afraid?" he asked, his voice low. "I was," she admitted. "But fear don't last long when someone's bleeding on your floor." A faint smile tugged at his mouth, quickly gone. "You could have let me die." "I've already buried one man," she said softly. "Didn't need another on my hands." The words settled heavy in the air. He nodded, as though he understood more than she meant to say. The days grew slower after that. Elias began to heal, his strength returning in quiet increments. He would sit near the hearth, mending his knife or staring at the fire while Clara worked at her sewing. They spoke little. When they did, their voices felt out of place in that small cabin, as though words themselves were too loud for the fragile peace between them. She noticed how carefully he moved, never touching what wasn't his, never stepping too close. Once, when she reached for the kettle, their hands brushed. The contact was brief, no longer than a breath, but it sent a shiver through her chest she couldn't name. One morning, the snow eased enough for him to step outside. Clara watched through the window as he tested his balance, breath clouding in the cold. The world seemed to lean around his figure, tall, scarred, alive. He knelt and brushed his fingers against the snow, whispering something in his own tongue, the syllables rising like smoke. When he came back in, he carried a bundle of wood, dropping it near the fire with quiet purpose. "You shouldn't." "I am not broken," he said simply. She wanted to argue, but his eyes silenced her. Instead, she fetched another log and joined him by the fire. They worked side by side until the small pile grew high, and the cabin smelled of resin and warmth. As the days blended into weeks, a rhythm took root. Two worlds learning to breathe under one roof. He repaired her fence and oiled her tools. She taught him the English words for everyday things: spoon, chair, light. Each time he repeated them, his voice softened, his accent bending around the syllables like a river smoothing stone. At night, he would tell her fragments of stories in his broken English. About the river where he was born, the songs his mother sang, the stars his people followed when the army drove them from their land. She listened, eyes wide, hands still over her mending. The way he spoke, slow, measured, reverent, made the world outside her walls feel suddenly smaller. And yet, for every quiet moment between them, the shadow of the world beyond the cabin lingered. When she rode into town one afternoon for flour and salt, whispers followed her like smoke. "The widow up on Ridge Creek's got company," someone said near the store porch. "Redskin, they say. Shot him herself, or maybe she's keeping him." She pretended not to hear, but shame burned under her collar as she mounted her horse. By the time she reached home, her hands trembled on the reins. Elias met her at the door, sensing something wrong. She forced a smile. "Just talk," she said. But her voice betrayed her fear. He watched her silently. "You should not bring trouble for me," he murmured. "It's not you," she whispered. "It's them. They don't forgive what they don't understand." That night, she couldn't sleep. The firelight threw their shadows onto the wall, his tall and still, hers smaller, hunched. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Elias said quietly, "When storm ends I go." Clara looked up sharply. "Go where? There's nothing but cold and men who'd kill you on sight." He turned to her, gaze steady. "Better die standing than make you lose your name." She felt anger then, soft, desperate anger. "You think I care about names?" she said. "About gossip?" He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. The next morning, she found him outside splitting wood. The sky had cleared, and sunlight glimmered on the snow like glass. Each swing of the axe was steady, almost graceful. Watching him, Clara felt something she hadn't in years: safety. It frightened her. When he came inside, his breath steaming in the cold, she handed him a cup of coffee. He took it with both hands, nodding once. "Thank you," he said. His voice carried warmth now, a softness earned. She hesitated, then said, "You could stay till spring." His eyes met hers, unreadable. "Spring is far," he said. "Snow hides many things, but not forever." Her hands tightened around the cup. Outside, a raven called from the pines, a single sound in the endless white. She didn't know if he meant to leave or to protect her by pretending to. Either way, she could feel the world creeping closer, step by step. That night, as the wind returned, Elias sat by the door sharpening his knife. The faint scrape of metal filled the silence. Clara sewed by the hearth, the needle flashing in rhythm with the sound. It felt like peace, but beneath it, danger stirred. Before she blew out the lamp, she caught his reflection in the window, his eyes distant, watching the trees. "Something out there?" she asked. He didn't turn. "Always," he said. When she finally slept, She dreamed of footprints in the snow leading away from the cabin, and another set, heavier, following close behind. By late February, the snow began to thin, melting into the dark veins of the valley like a secret dissolving. Mud replaced silence, and the road to town opened once more. Clara knew she couldn't avoid it any longer. Her supplies were gone, flour low, lamp oil near empty. Elias offered to go instead, but she shook her head. "You'd never come back," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The morning she left, he stood by the doorway, bare arms crossed, the light behind him painting his figure in amber. "They will look at you," he said quietly. "They always do," she replied, pulling her shawl tighter. She wanted to tell him she wasn't afraid of looks, only of losing what little peace they built between these walls. But she didn't. Instead, she rode off down the thawing trail, her heart a restless drum in her chest. Town had changed since winter began, though not for the better. Mud, gossip, and hunger clung to every corner. When Clara tied her mare near the store, eyes turned, sharp as nails, cold as creek water. Mrs. Beatrice Rowan, round as a kettle and twice as loud, stood near the porch with two other women. Her smile was sweet poison. "Why, if it isn't our snowbound widow," she said. "Didn't think we'd see you till spring thaw." Clara nodded, offering no warmth. She went inside, filled her basket with what she needed, salt, beans, sugar, and tried to ignore the voices leaking through the walls. Keeping someone up there, they say. An Indian, no less. Lord forgive her. Well, after her husband died, who knows what kind of company she keeps. Each word landed like grit beneath her skin. She paid quickly and left, but outside stood Sheriff Abner Lowe, hat low against the sun. He wasn't cruel. He was the kind of man whose silence could weigh more than words. "Clara," he said, nodding politely. "Been some talk?" "I heard." He studied her face. "You know what this town's like. Folks get scared easy." "They should stay scared," she said before she could stop herself. His brow lifted. "Just be careful. Don't give them reason to come calling." She turned her horse without answering, the echo of his warning following her long after the town disappeared behind the ridge. By the time she reached the cabin, dusk was falling. Elias waited by the woodpile, the axe still in his hands. When he saw her face, he didn't ask. He only said, "They spoke of me." She nodded. "They'll come if they think it's true." He set the axe down. "Then I go before they do." "No," the word slipped out too quickly, too desperate. "You leave, and it only proves them right." He looked at her for a long moment. "You risk everything." She shook her head. "I've got nothing left to lose but this place. And you've helped me keep it alive." His gaze softened, but beneath it was sorrow. "Where I walk, trouble follows." "Then let it find me too," she whispered. That night, neither of them slept. Elias cleaned his knife, movement slow, thoughtful. Clara sat by the fire, pretending to mend a shirt that didn't need mending. Between them, the air felt tight, full of things unsaid. At dawn, the sound of hooves shattered the quiet. Clara's heart stopped. Through the frosted window, she saw them. Four riders cutting through the trees, torches burning against the pale morning. Sheriff Lowe led them. Mrs. Rowan's husband was there too, and two younger men with rifles slung over their backs. "They'll kill you," she hissed. Elias had already risen, calm as still water. "I'll go to the barn. You say nothing." She grabbed his arm. "If they find you." "Then they find me." The look he gave her then was steady, almost tender, as if he were already saying goodbye. He slipped out the back door, vanishing into the white glare. Moments later came the knock. Heavy, deliberate. Clara opened the door to Sheriff Lowe's weathered face. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "Hope you don't mind us calling. We've got word there's been company here that shouldn't be." Her heart pounded so loud she feared they could hear it. "Company? Ain't seen another soul in weeks." One of the men snorted. "Tracks say otherwise." Mrs. Rowan's husband pushed past Lowe and looked around the cabin. "If he's here, we'll find him." Clara stepped between them. "You'll find a woman trying to live through winter, that's all." "Move aside," the man growled. Sheriff Lowe's voice cut through. "That's enough, Henry." He turned to Clara. "If he's here, it's best he comes willingly. We can't have folks thinking you're harboring trouble." Her jaw tightened. "What you call trouble, I call human." A hush fell. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Lowe sighed. "Clara, please. Don't make this harder." Before she could answer, a noise came from the barn. The creak of a door, faint but clear. All four men turned. Clara's blood went cold. Lowe motioned to the others. "Stay here." He started toward the barn, boots crunching in the snow. The others followed, rifles ready. Clara stood frozen, breath fogging in the cold air. Then she moved, swift, reckless, grabbing the rifle from beside the hearth. She followed them into the yard, the world narrowing to torchlight and fear. The barn door swung open. Inside, Elias stood in the dimness, hands raised, eyes steady. "I will come," he said simply. Lowe stopped, taken aback by the calm. "You surrender?" Elias nodded. "No more blood." One of the younger men spat. "You'll hang, savage." Clara's voice cut through before she knew it. "He saved my life." Every face turned toward her. "He could have left me to freeze, but he didn't." "You think that's the mark of a monster?" The torches flickered, the silence raw and uneasy. Lowe looked between them, at her shaking hands, at Elias's bare chest beneath the torn coat, at the wound that still hadn't fully healed. Then he lowered his gun. "We'll take him to town," he said quietly. "No harm if he comes quiet." Elias nodded once. He met Clara's eyes, and she felt the whole world collapse into that single glance. Gratitude, apology, something almost holy. As the men led him away, she stood rooted, unable to move. The torchlight faded down the path, swallowed by snow. She went back inside alone. The cabin felt wrong without his silence in it. His knife lay on the table, the handle smoothed by his hands. Beside it, something small, a carving of a bird, unfinished, wings curved mid-flight. She picked it up, tracing the edges. Outside, the wind began again, whispering over the hills. She pressed the carving to her chest, whispering his name into the empty air. Far away beyond the ridge, a single gunshot cracked the silence. Then nothing. Just the wind and the snow reclaiming the world. But as dawn bled into the horizon, a shape appeared far off. Tall, steady, walking toward the cabin through the pale mist. She couldn't tell if it was memory or man, but her heart began to race all the same. Dawn came slow that morning, dragging light across the snow like a wounded animal. Clara stood at the window, her fingers white against the sill, breath trembling in the chill. The men had left hours ago, taking Elias with them, their torches fading into the dark like dying stars. The silence they left behind was unbearable, too clean, too final. She had not slept. Every creak of the timbers, every sigh of the wind felt like his absence breathing through the cabin. The carving lay in her palm, a small bird unfinished, one wing smooth, the other raw from the knife. It felt alive, as though it still carried the heat of his hands. She closed her fingers around it. "Please," she whispered to no one. "Just let him live." Outside, the horizon shivered with pale fire. The world was waking. Somewhere beyond the pines, they would have reached town by now. He would be locked away, watched by men too proud to see mercy as anything but weakness. She could almost hear the sound of chains, the low murmur of voices calling him savage, murderer, less than man. She could not bear it. Clara pulled on her coat, stuffed the small carving into her pocket, and stepped into the cold. Her horse stamped nervously, mist curling from its nostrils. She saddled it with trembling hands, the ache in her chest sharp as the wind. The trail was frozen and rutted, the sky turning from gray to copper. She rode fast, the landscape rushing past, pine, ridge, shadow, snow. When she reached the edge of town, the streets were empty, but for the sheriff's horse tied near the jail. Smoke rose from chimneys, thin and lazy. She dismounted, heart hammering, and walked to the door. Abner Lowe was inside, sitting behind a desk, coat off, a cup of coffee steaming in his hand. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Clara," he said. "You shouldn't be here." "Where is he?" Lo sighed, setting his cup down. "Locked up till we figure what to do. He didn't fight, if that's what you're worried about." "I need to see him." "Best not." She stepped closer, voice shaking. "He saved me, Abner. He never raised a hand to anyone." The sheriff's gaze softened, but his tone stayed even. "That may be true. But there's law, and there's folks' fear. The first I can handle. The second, I can't stop." "Then I'll stop it," she said. He studied her, the edge of admiration in his silence. "You've got fire, Clara. Always did. But this is different. They want blood, not truth." She looked past him, to the small barred window at the back of the room. A shadow moved there, broad shoulders, dark hair, the faintest turn of a head. Her breath caught. "Please," she whispered. "Just let me speak to him." Lo hesitated, then stood. 2 minutes. He unlocked the back door and let her in. The cell was small, lit only by a shaft of gray light from above. Elias sat on the cot, wrists bound loosely, head bowed. When he looked up, she saw the mark of a bruise on his temple, faint but blooming. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "I had to." "You bring them trouble. They will turn on you." "I don't care," she said, stepping closer. "I care about you." His eyes flickered with something fragile. Disbelief, hope, sorrow. "Why?" "Because you didn't leave me in the snow. Because you split wood for my fire when you could have run. Because you looked at me like I wasn't a ghost." He shook his head, the faintest smile on his lips. "You are light. I was only trying not to die in it." Before she could answer, the door swung open. Lo's voice carried urgency. "You need to go. Now." "What happened?" "They're coming. Henry Rowan and a few others. They mean to take him out of here before I can stop them." Elias rose slowly. "Then I go now." Lo frowned. "You won't get far." Clara turned to him, eyes fierce. "If he dies, you'll have more than a mob to answer to. You'll have me." The sheriff hesitated only a second longer, then unlocked the cell. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered. "Go out the back. Take the ridge road. And Clara," he met her eyes, "don't come back tonight." Elias looked at him once, a silent nod of respect, then followed Clara through the narrow corridor. They slipped out the rear door into the biting wind. The sun had broken through the clouds, painting the snow with cruel brightness. They rode double on her mare, the world a blur of frost and fear. The trail curved along the ridge, treacherous but hidden. Behind them, faint voices carried on the wind, shouts, the crack of hooves, the echo of pursuit. When they reached the frozen creek, Clara pulled the horse to a halt. "We'll hide in the hollow," she said. Elias dismounted, scanning the woods. "They will find tracks. Then we'll cover them." They worked quickly, dragging branches to scatter the snow, leading the horse along the creek where the ice masked the trail. The forest closed around them, silent and cold. For a brief moment, time stood still. Elias turned to her, his breath misting in the air. "You should go back." "No. You have a life here." "I had one," she said, voice breaking. "Now I have you." He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent. "You risk everything for a man the world hates." "The world's wrong," she whispered. "It's been wrong before." They stood like that, close enough to feel each other's warmth against the winter. Then, from the ridge, came a distant shout, men's voices, closer than before. "They found us," he said. Clara's pulse surged. "We'll make for the ridge line. The snow's deeper there, they'll slow." They ran. The horse labored through drifts, lungs steaming, hooves cracking ice. Shots rang out, sharp, splitting the silence. One tore through the air near her shoulder. Elias turned in the saddle, raising his arm as if to shield her. Another shot cracked, and she felt him shudder behind her. "Elias!" He gritted his teeth, breath ragged. "Keep riding." The trail narrowed to a cliff's edge, wind screaming through the pines. She stopped, pulling him down from the horse. Blood seeped dark against his coat. "No," she whispered, pressing her hands to the wound. "Not again. I can't lose you." He caught her wrist, his grip weak but steady. "Listen. If they come, you say I took you. You say I made you. I won't lie. Then you die too. I'd rather that than live without you." For a moment, silence, only the wind and their breath entwined. Then footsteps, boots crushing snow, voices shouting through the trees. The mob was near. Elias pushed himself upright, towering despite the pain. "Go inside the rocks," he said. "Do not come out. I'm not hiding." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "You saved my life once. Let me return it." Before she could stop him, he stepped into the open. The snow caught the light around him, his figure a dark flame against the white. The men appeared through the trees. Henry Rowan first, rifle raised, hate burning in his face. "There he is. Put the gun down," Clara shouted, rushing forward. Henry sneered. "You'd defend him after all he's done? You shame your kind." Elias stood unmoving, his voice calm. "She has no shame. Only heart." The words hung in the cold air. Henry fired. The sound split the valley. But the bullet struck the rock beside Elias, throwing sparks. Before Henry could reload, Sheriff Lowe rode into the clearing, his gun drawn. "Enough!" he roared. "There's been blood enough for one winter." The men froze, faces pale. Lowe dismounted, stepping between them and Elias. "You'll not murder a man under my watch." Henry spat into the snow. "He's not a man. He's a savage." Lowe's gaze hardened. "Then what does that make you, shooting at an unarmed one?" The crowd wavered, their fury cracking under the weight of shame. Clara moved to Elias's side, slipping her arm around him. His knees nearly buckled, but he stayed upright. Lowe lowered his gun. "Take him home, Clara," he said. "Let the snow bury this madness." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. Together, she and Elias turned toward the ridge, moving slow, each step marked by red blooming through the white. The wind carried the sound of hooves fading behind them. When they reached the cabin again, the fire inside was cold. Clara helped him to the chair by the hearth, her hands trembling as she lit the flame. He watched her, exhaustion softening his face. "You'll live," she said, voice breaking with certainty she didn't have. He smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy. Then believe me anyway." She pressed a cloth to his wound, whispering prayers that were half memory, half plea. Outside, the snow began again, soft, relentless, pure. Hours passed. The fire grew strong, filling the room with light. Elias's breathing slowed, steadying. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the back of her palm. "You healed me twice," he said quietly. "Once the body, once the heart." Clara's eyes filled. "Then stay. Please." He looked toward the window, where dawn was beginning again, gentle and golden. "I will stay till spring," he said. "And if the world still wants to burn, we will give it fire worth fearing." She smiled through her tears, resting her forehead against his. The snow outside shimmered like ash, and the fire crackled beneath it, a defiant pulse of warmth in a world that had forgotten mercy. In the stillness that followed, the narrator's voice would rise like the last breath of winter itself. The world will always judge what it cannot understand. But sometimes, beneath the snow and the silence, there burns a different kind of fire, the kind that does not destroy, only redeems. If you ever find a soul the world calls unworthy, remember them. For it is mercy, not might, that keeps love alive through the cold.